It was one of those evenings when the city felt alive, and yet strangely hollow. The lights from the mall shimmered against the wet pavement, and people moved like waves, faces glowing with the blue hue of phone screens, laughter echoing faintly against the glass walls. Ayan walked out of the mall carrying a bag of books and a coffee he hadn't really wanted. He was there just to escape his apartment, the silence, the memories that still sat heavy in the corners of his mind. It had been 3 years since Rhea left. No note, no call, no explanation, just silence so deep it had rewritten the rhythm of his days. He had loved her in a way that made time irrelevant, but she had vanished overnight. He told himself he'd moved on, told his friends he didn't care, told the mirror that some stories were never meant to end well. But when he stepped out of the mall that night and saw a figure sitting on the cold ground by the gate, his heart paused before he did. She sat near the wall, wrapped in a dull shawl, her hair tangled, her hands stretched forward for coins. Her eyes lifted slowly when he passed, and he froze. Those eyes, the same hazel-green shade that had once looked at him like he was the only certainty in the world. For a second he thought his mind was playing tricks. Maybe it was someone else, someone who just looked like her. But then she blinked, and the corner of her lips trembled in a way that made his chest tighten. It was her, Rhea. The girl who had left without a goodbye was sitting on the street, begging. The world around him blurred into noise, the honking, the footsteps, the chatter, all of it faded into the background as he stood there, unable to breathe. He didn't know what to do. Part of him wanted to run to her, to ask what had happened, where she had been, why she was here like this. Another part wanted to turn away, to protect what little was left of his pride. But before he could think, she looked down, her hand curling back into her lap as if she hoped he hadn't recognized her. That gesture broke something inside him. He walked toward her slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. Rhea. His voice was quiet, uncertain, almost afraid of being wrong. She didn't answer at first. Her shoulders stiffened, but her eyes stayed on the ground. He crouched down, trying to see her face clearly. "It's you, isn't it?" Finally, she looked up, and a faint smile flickered and died on her lips. "Ayan," she whispered, the name escaping like a ghost of the past. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The noise of the city filled the silence between them. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but words felt useless, almost cruel. She looked fragile, her cheeks sunken, her clothes worn thin. He remembered how she used to love dressing in soft colors, her hair always brushed neatly, her laughter bright. The contrast hurt to look at. "What happened to you?" he finally asked, his voice shaking. She shook her head, looking away. "You shouldn't be here." "That's not an answer," he said quietly. "You disappeared. No note, nothing. I thought you were gone for good, and now I find you here like this." Her eyes filled with tears she didn't bother to wipe. "Life doesn't always go the way we plan," she murmured. "Sometimes it breaks you before you even realize it." He wanted to reach out, but something about the way she sat there, like the world had stripped her of everything, made him hesitate. "Come with me," he said. "We'll talk. You can't stay out here." She flinched at his tone. "I can't," she whispered. "This is where I belong now." "No," he said firmly. "No one belongs here, especially not you." Her eyes searched his face as if trying to believe that he was real. "You shouldn't care," she said bitterly. "You shouldn't even recognize me after what I did." He let out a soft, broken laugh. "You think I could forget you? I tried, Rhea. God knows I tried. But you don't just erase someone who used to be your whole world." She looked down again, her shoulders trembling. He could see the shame in her posture, the way she avoided his gaze. He wanted to shake her, to demand the truth, but instead he just sat down beside her on the cold pavement. People glanced at them, a few sneered, but he didn't care. "Tell me what happened," he said gently. For a long time she didn't speak. Then, in a voice barely audible, she said, "My father lost everything. The debts, the threats, they came for us. I thought I could fix it. I thought if I went away, if I married the man who promised to help, I could save him. But it was a lie. He used me, hurt me, left me with nothing. When I finally escaped, I had nowhere to go. My father had passed away. I didn't have the courage to face anyone, least of all you." Ayan felt the words sink into him like stones. His jaw tightened as he tried to process it all. "You could have told me. We could have faced it together." "I couldn't," she said through tears. "You had dreams, Ayan. You were building your life, your career. I didn't want to ruin it for you. I didn't want you to carry my burdens." He exhaled shakily, his hands clenched around the coffee cup that had gone cold. "You think losing you didn't ruin me? I didn't need your perfection, Rhea. I just needed you." Her sobs broke whatever was left of his anger. He took off his jacket and placed it around her shoulders. She tried to resist, but the warmth made her shiver less. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's get you something to eat." She hesitated, her pride flickering in her eyes, but hunger won over. He led her to a small cafe nearby, ignoring the curious stares as he guided her inside. She sat quietly, her hands trembling slightly as she held the cup of tea the waiter brought. Ayan watched her, the same girl who once laughed over late-night coffee dates, now sitting across from him like a shadow of who she used to be. He asked nothing while she ate, afraid that if he said too much, she might disappear again. After a while, she whispered, "I didn't expect to see you. I thought you'd hate me." He sighed. "I did for a while. I told myself you didn't care. But now," he paused, searching her eyes, "now I just wish you hadn't gone through all this alone." She looked at him with a kind of exhaustion that comes from too much pain. "Sometimes life doesn't give you choices. Sometimes you just have to disappear." "Then let me help you reappear," he said gently. Her eyes widened slightly, and for the first time that night, a flicker of hope crossed her face. "You'd really help me, after everything." "I don't know what the future looks like," he admitted, "but I can't walk away again, not this time." She didn't speak for a long time after that. When she finally did, her voice was quiet. "I don't deserve your kindness." "Maybe not," he said softly, "but I'm giving it anyway." He took her to a shelter that night, one he had helped volunteer at years ago. The caretaker recognized him and let them in without questions. Rhea stayed silent the whole time, her gaze fixed on the ground. Before he left, he turned to her. "I'll come tomorrow," he said. "We'll figure things out." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. When Ayan walked out, the night air felt colder, sharper. But for the first time in years, he felt something shift inside him. Maybe it was hope, or maybe it was just the sense that some stories aren't meant to end in silence. The next day, he returned with new clothes and some food. She looked better already, still fragile, but cleaner, calmer. She smiled faintly when she saw him. "You actually came back." "I said I would." They spent hours talking that day, about old memories, about what had happened after she left, about how he'd thrown himself into work to fill the void she'd left behind. She listened quietly, sometimes smiling, sometimes crying. When he told her he'd always kept one of her sketches on his desk, she looked away, biting her lip to keep from crying again. Days turned into weeks. He helped her find small work at a nearby store. She was hesitant at first, but slowly she began to rebuild pieces of herself. Every day she seemed a little more like the girl he used to know, though some scars never faded completely. One evening, as they sat by the park, watching the sunset, she turned to him and said, "You know, I used to dream about seeing you again. But in my dreams, I was the same girl you fell in love with, not this broken version." He shook his head. "You're not broken, Rhea. You survived. That's strength." She smiled sadly. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," he said, "but you don't have to do it alone anymore." For a long time, they just sat there in silence, the golden light wrapping around them like forgiveness. Weeks later, she finally told him everything, every detail she had hidden, every bruise, every night she had slept under open skis, afraid of being found. He listened without judgment, his eyes sometimes wet, his hand steady on hers. By the time she finished, the sky was dark, and she whispered, "I don't know if I can ever be the person I was." "Maybe you don't have to be," he said softly. "Maybe this is who you are now, and maybe that's enough." She looked at him for a long time, then smiled through her tears. "You still talk like you believe in happy endings." He laughed quietly. "No, I believe in second chances." Months passed. Rhea found work as a teacher at a small art center. She still carried the past with her, but she carried it differently now, like a story, not a wound. Ayan visited often. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they just shared silence, but there was comfort in it. One evening, as rain began to fall outside the cafe where they sat, She looked at him and said, "That day outside the mall, I almost pretended not to recognize you." "I noticed," he said softly. "I was scared," she admitted. "Scared you'd look at me and see nothing but the girl who ran away." He smiled faintly. "I didn't see that. I saw the girl I never stopped loving." Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they didn't feel like sorrow. She reached across the table and took his hand. "Thank you for finding me." He shook his head. "You were never really lost. You just needed someone to remind you of who you were." She laughed quietly, a sound he hadn't heard in years, and for a moment the world outside the window felt still, like time had paused just for them. Later that night, as they walked home under the same umbrella, Rhea looked up at the sky and said, "You know, I used to think goodbye was the hardest word." "And now?" he asked. "Now I think it's hello," she said softly, "because hello means you're brave enough to start again." He squeezed her hand gently. "Then let's start again." And they did, not perfectly, not magically, but honestly. Two broken hearts learning to beat in rhythm again, two lost souls finding their way back, not to the past, but to something new, something real. Outside that same mall months later, the spot where she once sat begging was empty. The city still moved in waves, lights still shimmered, and life went on. But sometimes, Ayan would stop by and remember that night, the moment everything changed. The night he saw a beggar outside the mall, and it was the girl who left him without a goodbye.